Somewhere in the Timor Sea, 300 kilometers off the northwest coast of Australia, there is a tiny island with no trees, no residents, and no visitors. The beaches are technically Australian territory. The reef around it is one of the most biodiverse marine environments on the continent, and buried somewhere in the sand, left over from 40 years of Australian Air Force bombing runs, are weapons that could still kill you today. The island has been cleaned, government teams swept it, and they still cannot guarantee it is safe. The prohibition stands. Australia has more than 8,000 islands scattered across its coastline, its internal waterways, and its external territories stretching from the tropics to the edge of Antarctica, and a striking number of them, along with certain places on the mainland, are completely, legally, permanently off limits. Some because of military secrets nobody will fully explain, some because of indigenous sacred law older than any government on earth, some because the wildlife there is so important, so fragile, so irreplaceable that human footprints are simply not worth the risk. Today, we are counting down 12 places in Australia that you are not allowed to visit. Some you have heard of, some you almost certainly have not. Let's get into it. Number 12, Heart Reef, Queensland. Let's start with the one that sounds the most romantic and turns out to be the most forbidden. Heart Reef is a small coral formation in the Whitsunday region of the Great Barrier Reef, shaped almost perfectly like a heart, a natural formation, not sculpted, not arranged, just grown that way over thousands of years of coral accumulation. It sits inside Hardy Reef, roughly 70 kilometers offshore from Airlie Beach. It is one of the most photographed natural formations in Australia. It appears on tourism posters, in airline magazines, on screensavers, and you are not allowed anywhere near it. Not to sail, not to snorkel, not to anchor. The reef has protected status under the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority. The only way to see it legally is from the air, a scenic flight or helicopter tour that circles above at altitude. Thousands of people do this every year, cameras pointed downward, close enough to see the shape but never close enough to touch the water. The restriction exists because Heart Reef is a coral structure, and coral is extraordinarily sensitive. A single boat anchor dragged across the wrong spot can shatter coral that took a century to form. A sunscreen from a swimmer's skin can bleach and kill a colony. The reef is also exceptionally shallow, making physical damage from watercraft almost inevitable. Here is the irony. Heart Reef exists because it was left alone. The same isolation that made it survive also made it beautiful, and the only way to keep it beautiful is to keep leaving it alone. Number 11, Bouncing Stones Beach, Daintree, Queensland. There is a beach in the Daintree National Park in far north Queensland that has no public access, no signposted trail, no permitted entry, no tourist infrastructure. It takes its name from a strange geological quirk, smooth flat rocks on the shore that can be made to bounce off one another like balls, a feature so unusual it has drawn curious visitors for generations. But Bouncing Stones Beach is a sacred site of the Kuku-Yalanji people, one of the oldest continuous living cultures on Earth. For the women of the tribe, it was a place of gathering and of ceremonial significance, where women's business was conducted, private and protected. The site was also used as a burial ground. People who are buried there are still buried there. Their remains have never been removed. The Kuku-Yalanji were displaced from their lands during the colonial period, forcibly relocated by police and army to missions at Daintree and Mossman as recently as the 1950s. In September 2021, the Australian government handed back 160,000 hectares of land, including sections of the Daintree rainforest, to the Eastern Kuku-Yalanji people. With that return came the right to enforce their own cultural protocols over their sacred sites. The beaches close. The Kuku-Yalanji are not asking, they are deciding. Number 10, the Blue Hole, Daintree National Park, Queensland. A short distance away, deep in the ancient tropical rainforest north of Cairns, there is a water hole with water so blue it looks like something from a travel magazine. The jungle presses in from all sides. The light through the canopy turns the surface into something close to turquoise. It is, by every account, one of the most beautiful swimming holes in Australia. The gate is locked. Signs urge visitors to stay out, and for once, the reason is not bureaucratic. The Blue Hole, known to the eastern Kuku Yalanji as Kaba Gada, is a sacred women's place. Specifically, it belongs to the Jalunjiwara clan. It is a healing pool and a birthing place. Traditional custodian Robin Belafqui has said publicly that it is reserved for women's business. Men are forbidden entirely. Other women, including other Kuku Yalanji women from different clans, cannot enter without permission from the custodians. The consequences, according to the Jalunjiwara, are not merely legal, they are physical. One visitor, a man from overseas who swam there without permission, despite being asked to stop, returned years later and told a traditional owner he had become sterile. The traditional owner was not surprised. In our cultural way, Belafqui has said, that's what would happen to men if they went there. You do not have to share that belief to respect the instruction. The gate is there. The signs are there. The traditional owners are clear. Stay out. Number 9. Albatross Island, Tasmania. Off the northwest tip of Tasmania, 35 kilometers across the notoriously rough and unpredictable waters of Bass Strait, there is an 18-hectare island with no trees, no beach to land on, jagged coastal rocks, and a permanent colony of approximately 5,000 breeding pairs of shy albatross. That number, 5,000 breeding pairs, represents roughly 40% of the entire global population of the species. The shy albatross breeds on only 3 islands in the world. All 3 are in Tasmania. Albatross Island is the most important of them. The birds were hunted to near extinction in the 19th century for their feathers, reduced at one point to just a few hundred individuals. They have slowly recovered. The colony is listed as vulnerable under federal law, so the population is still in decline. Scientists believe changing ocean conditions and bycatch and longline fishing operations are killing birds faster than the colony can replace them. No public access is permitted. Full stop. The Tasmanian Parks and Wildlife Service allows only a small team of researchers to visit several times per year in weather windows that can stretch weeks apart. The crossing alone has stopped many attempts. Bass Strait does not care about research schedules, and the rocky coastline offers no beach, no jetty, no safe landing, just barnacled rocks that must be jumped with all gear at once. The researchers sleep in a cave shared with nesting penguins. They work fast and leave everything exactly as they found it. The island, one researcher has said, is one of those places that thrives and survives without people. You get the sense that it has existed for thousands of years and will continue to do so long after we're gone. That is the point. Number 8. Cartier Island, Timor Sea. Now we get to the island with unexploded bombs in the sand. Cartier Island is a small, uninhabited sandy cay in the Timor Sea, about 300 kilometers off the northwest coast of Western Australia. It measures roughly 0.4 hectares, barely the size of a suburban block. For centuries, it was a traditional fishing ground for Indonesian fishermen who harvested turtles, sea cucumbers, shells, and birds' eggs from its reef. In 1888, a vessel called the Anne Millicent wrecked on its southern edge. The rusted remains of a Second World War RAAF Beaufighter aircraft can still be seen at low tide. After World War II, the island was used as an Air Force bombing and air weapons range for approximately 40 years. In 2003, it became a fully protected marine sanctuary. In 2011, its designation as an active defense practice area officially lapsed. The problem is what got left behind. Parks Australia's own official management documents state that landing on Cartier Island or anchoring anywhere within the marine park is strictly prohibited because, and this is a quote from their official guidance, there is a substantial risk that unexploded ordnances remain in the area. They swept the island. They conducted clearance operations. They searched the sand and the shallow water, and they still cannot guarantee it is safe. The sand moves. The ordnance moves with it. Something that was cleared last decade may now be buried differently in a different spot or exposed again by tidal action. The wreck of the Anne Millicent lies in the sand nearby. So does, somewhere, the hardware of 40 years of aerial target practice. Entering without written approval from the Director of National Parks risks federal charges. It also risks stepping on something that has been waiting patiently in the sand for 70 years. Number 7. Pine Gap, Northern Territory. Just 23 kilometers southwest of Alice Springs, in the Red Desert of the Northern Territory, there is a facility surrounded by security fencing, monitored perimeters, and what look from the air like dozens of enormous white golf balls. Those white spheres, radomes, each contain a satellite antenna in continuous communication with intelligence-gathering satellites in Earth's orbit. Pine Gap, officially the Joint Defense Facility Pine Gap, it is the most important United States intelligence facility outside American soil. It was established in 1966 under a classified treaty, began operations in 1970, and for the first decade, Australian citizens, including Australian prime ministers, were kept almost entirely in the dark about what actually happened there. Today, it employs approximately 1,000 people, roughly evenly split between Australian and American staff. What it does broadly is now known. It intercepts electronic signals from across Asia, supports satellite-based missile detection systems, contributes to targeting data for U.S. military operations, and forms a critical node of the Five Eyes global surveillance network. What it does specifically on any given day is classified. Attempts to protest at the gates, and there have been many, going back to a 1983 women's peace camp where 700 activists gathered and 111 were arrested, end in detention. In 2024, 3 Australian YouTubers drove out to the facility and attempted to enter the front gate. They were briefly detained, questioned, and turned away. They had also, as a prank, kicked a soccer ball over the security fence and asked to retrieve it. That request was also declined. Access to anyone without security clearance is strictly forbidden. The penalty for unauthorized entry under the Defense, Special Undertakings Act 1952 is up to 7 years in prison. 4 protesters who broke into the facility in 2005 were the first people ever prosecuted under that act. Number 6. Swan Island, Victoria. In Port Phillip Bay, just off the coast near Queenscliff in Victoria, there is a sand barrier island that was first militarized in the 1870s. A fort was established to protect the bay's entrance from a feared Russian naval invasion. It was used as a depot for naval mines in World War I. It has been a military training area since World War II. Today, Swan Island Military Base sits behind a security perimeter with no public access, no explanation to civilians about current operations, and very deliberate silence from the Department of Defense about what exactly is being trained for there. Rumor has established Swan Island as the home base of Australia's Special Air Service Regiment's counter-terrorism elements. Neither the government nor the military has confirmed this in any official detail. What is confirmed is that the island is completely off limits. It has been consistently used for classified training purposes for over a century, and that no civilian has set foot on it in living memory outside of authorized personnel. You can stand on the Queenscliff foreshore and look across the water at it. That is as close as you will get. Number 5. Heard Island and McDonald Islands. Here is the part that will stay with you. Heard Island lies 4,100 kilometers southwest of Perth, roughly halfway between Australia and South Africa, in the Southern Ocean. Its highest point is Mawson Peak at 2,745 meters, the tallest mountain on any Australian territory, including Antarctica. About 70% of the island is permanently covered in glaciers. There is an active volcano erupting near continuously since the early 2000s, observable only by satellite. The wind gusts of up to 209 kilometers per hour have been recorded at the island's weather station. The last humans to maintain any substantial presence on the island were a research team that spent a winter there in 1992. Since then, no one has stayed. Heard Island and the McDonald Islands together form a UNESCO World Heritage Site, designated in 1997 for one specific reason above all others: the complete absence of alien plants and animals. In a world where virtually every island of any size has been invaded by rats, mice, cats, or weeds, Heard Island remains pristine. Its elephant seal colonies and penguin rookeries are among the largest and healthiest in the Southern Ocean. Its seabird populations are intact in ways that exist almost nowhere else on the planet. Access is permit only through the Australian Antarctic Division. The permits are almost never granted. Getting there requires a 2-week voyage across some of the most dangerous seas on Earth, through the roaring 40s and furious 50s, latitude bands known by those names for very specific reasons. The weather is hostile, the seas are violent, and the island has no harbor. The last Trump administration, in 2025, imposed tariffs on Heard Island and the McDonald Islands. The islands have no inhabitants, no economy, no exports. They were included on the tariff list because they are Australian territory. The Australian government responded without particular alarm. The islands themselves, as they have done for thousands of years, did not respond at all. Number 4. Uluru Sacred Sites, Northern Territory. Uluru is one of the most recognizable natural formations on the planet. The sandstone monolith rises 348 meters above the central Australian desert and stretches nearly 10 kilometers around its base. It is, to the Anangu people, the traditional owners of the land, one of the most sacred places in existence. Climbing Uluru was permanently banned on October 26, 2019, the 34th anniversary of the handback, when the Australian government returned title to the Anangu after decades of lobbying. The ban was voted on unanimously by the Parks Board of Management in 2017. It came into legal effect in 2019. In the weeks before the ban took effect, hundreds of people raced to the rock to complete the climb before it closed. Anangu elders watched this final surge of footsteps on their sacred ground in silence. But the climb is not the only restriction. There are numerous sites around the base of Uluru and throughout Uluru Kata Chuta National Park that are completely off limits to non-Anangu visitors at all times. These are sacred men's sites and women's sites where specific ceremonial knowledge is kept. Photography of certain areas is prohibited. The park's information signage actively directs visitors away from these zones because the Anangu have asked that the visual content of those sites not even be documented by outsiders. An Anangu traditional owner put it plainly when asked why tourists continue to approach restricted areas despite the signs. Tourists have closed ears, she said, and fire in their ears. At least 36 people died attempting to climb Uluru before the ban. Between 2002 and 2009 alone, 74 climbers required medical rescues. The Anangu's concern for their sacred place and their concern for visitor safety were, it turned out, exactly the same concern. Number 3, Mount Coonawarra, Queensland. On the Sunshine Coast hinterland, in the Glass House Mountains, north of Brisbane, Mount Coonawarra rises as the most dramatic and most angular of the volcanic peaks in the range. Its silhouette is jagged and unmistakable. For decades, it was a popular rock climbing destination, drawing technical climbers from across the country. In 1999, the Queensland government declared Mount Coonawarra a restricted access area. The stated reason was public safety. The mountain is assessed as having a high to very high risk of rockfalls, with unstable columns of volcanic rock near the summit that could detach without warning. But there is a parallel story. The Jinibara people, the traditional owners of the Glass House Mountains, have long considered Mount Coonawarra, which they call Crookneck, a sacred site. The mountain is, in Jinibara tradition, the son of Tibrogargan, another peak in the range. The entire Glass House Mountains landscape represents an ancestral family, and Coonawarra holds specific ceremonial significance. The Jinibara elders have been asking for the mountain to be closed to climbers for years before the government's safety-based decision made it official. The restriction remains. You can walk the surrounding national park. You can look up at the peak from the base. You cannot climb it. The rock and the people who have held it as sacred for thousands of years remain undisturbed above you. Number 2, Cleft Island, Skull Rock, Victoria. In Wilson's Promontory Marine National Park, off the southern coast of Victoria, there is a sea stack so sheer on every side that fewer humans are believed to have set foot on it than have stood on the surface of the moon. Cleft Island, also known locally as Skull Rock, rises dramatically from the Bass Strait as a single column of granite with no accessible shoreline, no beach, no ledge of any kind that could serve as a landing point. Its sheer vertical faces plunge directly into the ocean on all sides. At its summit, there is a large cave opening that looks from certain angles like the eye socket of a skull. Inside, the cave runs almost the full length of the island. The island sits within a special protection area in the Marine National Park. Under the park management plan, public access is completely prohibited in order to protect its remote and natural attributes. The local claim that fewer humans have stood on Cleft Island than on the moon is not provably wrong. There is no government expedition underway to verify it. There is no permit process that could realistically get you there. And even if the prohibition were lifted, the island would still present almost no physical means of landing. The sea stack exists at an intersection of legal restriction and physical impossibility that makes it, in practical terms, about as accessible as the surface of another planet. Number 1, Heard Island in eruption and the McDonald Islands, and the broader category they represent. We have already told you about Heard Island, but here is what most people do not understand about why it sits at number 1. It is not just that the island is remote or restricted or dangerous to reach, but it is that Heard Island and the McDonald Islands represent something that almost no longer exists on this planet, a large island ecosystem that human civilization has simply failed to damage. No rats, no cats, no weeds, no feral animals of any kind. The beaches are covered in elephant seals that have never been hunted in the memory of any living animal. The penguin colonies are intact the way they were before European contact changed every other accessible shoreline in the Southern Ocean. The glacier that covers 70% of the island is retreating. That is the work of climate change, which respects no boundary and no permit system. But the biological integrity of the place is, against all odds, complete. There is a volcano erupting on this island right now. There are penguins nesting within sight of the lava flows. There are seals on beaches no human being has walked in over 30 years. there is a weather system so violent that a mean wind speed of 26 kilometers per hour has been recorded as an average, with gusts exceeding 200. The Australian government restricts access to protect it from the one thing that has destroyed every other place like it, us. Every island on this list was protected for different reasons: sacred obligation, unexploded ordnance, military secrecy, endangered species, physical impossibility, cultural law older than any written statute. But all of them share one underlying truth: the world has places that are better off without us in them. And the slowly growing recognition that this is true, that some of the most important places on the planet are the ones we are not standing on, is one of the few ideas worth holding on to. The forces that have damaged every other place like these, tourism pressure, resource extraction, development, careless human curiosity, have not gone away. They are pushing against every fence, every prohibition sign, every heritage listing, every sacred boundary on this list. The question is whether the fences hold,